Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Decoding the Unknown. Something a little bit different for you today because I can't exactly remember how this played out because honestly these trips are written like months ahead and then I finally get to them. But I think I had an idea or Kevin had an idea and then he was like, this isn't big enough for like an episode because we need to hit like, I don't know what, at least 20 minutes, half an hour for these. Otherwise they're just not really full episodes and everyone gets disappointed. So Kevin was like, yeah, let's just do more than one in one episode. And I'm like, okay, why not? So that's what we got today. The creepiest mysteries discovered in video games. Little bit of a listicle, if you could call it that. Those do well on YouTube, or at least they did back in the day. Still do. Okay, the format of the show, if you're new here, Kevin writes it, I read it. Never read it before. Let's go. Mixing horror with video games is an idea as old as the medium itself. Yeah, I remember my parents let me play Doom when I was like 10. I'm not sure why. My parents didn't let me watch Power Rangers when I was a kid because they thought it was too violent. But video games seemed to get a complete pass. So I was playing like Doom, you know, the original PlayStation 1 version or whatever as a kid. And it was scary, dude. The oldest horror games date back to the 1970s, though they would obviously be hilariously tame by modern standards. Compared to games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, these old games are a laughable relic of the past. Even Doom, I feel, is pretty laughable by today's standards of like VR horror games. Like I played a zombie game in VR the other day with a mate of mine and I'm like,
dude, this is actually scary. My heart is actually racing.
Of course, few video games are capable of creating a genuine feeling of horror or fear in the player. Horror games often rely on cheap jump scares that may be startling but don't instill any real sense of fear. I've been playing video games nearly my entire life and there is only one game that ever truly scared me. It was Eternal Darkness for the Nintendo GameCube. Oh my god. It's a blast from the past. Nintendo GameCube. What happened to that? Hello everybody, just before we continue with today's episode, if you ever wish for smoother, softer skin, I mean, who hasn't? You look at those magazines, you're like, oh, why face? Why don't you look like that? Well, look, I'm no skincare expert. If you wanted skincare tips, you have come to the wrong YouTube channel. But since I've been sponsored by Foreo, not the first time, not the first device, it's been fantastic. Like, I've started using their products. I'm getting dangerously close to middle age. I'm getting lines on my forehead and around my eyes. And I've been using Foreo to, you know, stave off that middle age just a little bit. I mean, not literally. I'm still gonna be middle aged, but hopefully I won't look so old, which is nice. Look, this is Foreo's latest. This is an LED face mask. It's ultra lightweight. It's wireless. It fits perfectly in your face thanks to its Flexi Fit silicone. It's got 8 different wavelengths, including near infrared. And watch this. It just lights up like that. Isn't that brilliant? Isn't that amazing? It tackles the signs of aging and other skin concerns. I've been using it for a while. Along with all the other Foreo products that I've tried, they make my skin smooth and less dull. It's just nice. I'm not an expert, but I'm just like, oh, there, look at that. That looks better. You just wear it with a clean, dry face. You apply a primer if you want, and you put the mask on with the headband, and bada bing, bada boom. You change the LED colors for the different programs, and it's just like that. You can do it in the FAQ Swiss app, by the way. So this is the FAQ 202 from Foreo. And right now, they're celebrating their 11th birthday with amazing deals on their website. Plus, you can use my code, unknown11, for an extra 11% off, which is brilliant. So if you'd like to transform your skin, get the FAQ 202 by Foreo. Your skin will thank you. Big thanks to them for sponsoring, and now back to today's episode. Eternal Darkness was a creepy survivor horror game with a unique mechanic. Most games had a health bar for your character, and if there was magic involved, there would be a mana bar used to cast spells. Eternal Darkness had both of those, but it added a third resource, sanity. Ooh, I like that. That's clever. As your sanity was depleted by enemies, weird stuff would happen in the game. You might see blood dripping down the walls, the camera could get distorted or tilted, and you could even see monsters that weren't really there. Those monsters could still kill you, but they would disappear if you restored your sanity. However, the developers were also dicks, and they decided to toy with the sanity of the actual player rather than just the character you were controlling. Whoa, how? One night I was playing Eternal Darkness and decided it was time to save my game before going to bed. It had been an hour or two since the last time I had saved my progress, so imagine my terror when I went to the game menu, clicked on save game, and was suddenly met with a blue screen of death instead of seeing my game save as normal. They're just fucking with you, aren't they? It's just going to be like a an image of blue screen. Eventually, the game went back to normal and I was allowed to save, but by that point, I'd already frozen in place and dropped my controller in horror. It's probably the most clever thing I've ever seen done to scare a player. Granted, there is no blue screen of death on Nintendo consoles, but this was back in 2002 when getting one from Windows felt like a near daily occurrence. Yeah, I haven't seen a blue screen of death, which is, when your computer crashes and you get that just very bright blue screen with the white text in it, which, I don't know, to a non-super technical person like me, it's just like, oh, a system error, huh? Okay, let's press the restart button and hope that doesn't happen again. The implications of that screen were so ingrained in all of us that I didn't have time to logic my way through the fact that it couldn't have been real. However, not all creepy things found in video games have been so innocuous. Sometimes, the things that appear on our screens could have truly sinister and mysterious backstories. And this isn't restricted to just horror games either. So now, it's time to talk about mini-golf. Okay, I've recently been, well, not recently, it's been a few months actually. I got quite into, what's it called? There's a golf game that you can play on the Oculus. And they've got like a little putting green. I got sadly compelled by the putting green. Just putting. And then they'll be like, do you want to go out on the main golf course? No, I just like putting. I am a sad man. Sentei's Missing Children. Sentei was a small arcade game company created by a few former members of Atari. In 1984, they were acquired by Bally Midway of Mortal Kombat fame. Bally Sentei only existed for a few years until the division went bankrupt in 1988 and became defunct, but they were able to pump out dozens of games in the few years that they existed. Really? Nowadays, it feels like, when was the last time we got Grand Theft Auto? Like Grand Theft Auto 5, I feel like that was like a decade ago. Come on! When's the new one? I'm excited! I just dropped an unreasonable amount of money on a brand new graphics card for my computer.
$3 million US.
So I'm like excited. Come on, Grand Theft Auto 6, let's go! Now imagine the year is 1985. I know you'd be like negative 2 years old at this point, Simon, but hear me out. I can imagine 1985. It was... Well done, Kevin. It was 2 years before I was born. You go to the local arcade with a fistful of quarters to kill some time, and out of the corner of your eye, a new machine catches your eye. The game is called Sentei Minigolf, possibly the first ever minigolf designed for arcade cabinets. That's kind of cool. Like a golfing simulator, but back in the day, and for putting. You walk towards the machine as it runs in attract mode, cycling through its screens like any other arcade cabinet. Oh, I didn't know that was called attract mode. Where it's like got insert coins flashing on the screen and it's showing racing or whatever. You see the game's title screen, the developer credits, and some demo footage of the game. By the time you reach the cabinet, the high score list is being displayed. But just as you're about to reach down to insert a quarter into the machine, you suddenly find yourself face to face with this image. Okay, so for our audio listeners... obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, hello there. This will be up on the screen. It is an image of a side-by-side of two children. One is, I would say, 3 years old. The other is, I don't know. I find it very hard to judge the age of children who are older than my children. Like, if you ask me the age of any child between the age of 1 and 4, I'll be like, that child is 2.5. But any child over 4, I'm like, no idea. Because I don't have a reference point. But I'd say 6 or 7, maybe 8. And basically it's a missing thing. So it's got a missing at the top and then a number, and then it's got their details. So 1982. That kid is 3 years old, and the other one is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. Okay, so I was right on the first one. Like I said, I could get the first one. Can't get the second one, because the first one's, my kids have been that old. The second one, I'm like, oh, that kid's 12. I thought he was 8. I've no idea. The concept of images like this showing up in daily life wasn't that unusual for those of us in the US. By the time I was a kid, it was no longer common, but anyone old enough to visit an arcade in 1985 had likely seen plenty of missing children notices like this on milk cartons. But nobody had seen it on video games before, and there's something a bit unsettling about the images. The grainy black and white pictures emanating from an otherwise colourful screen, combined with the almost overexposed quality of the image on the left. Yeah, the image on the left is just overexposed, the one on the right is slightly underexposed, but still much better. Made this an eerie and unsettling sight for a lot of people, so much so that despite Sentei games not being particularly successful, people remembered these pictures decades later and then began asking questions about them online. And in places where these old arcade machines are still in use, these images may still be appearing. Well, that's a weird thing, right? Like, this would make much more sense today, where there can be like over-the-air updates and such things, like the machine can update via Wi-Fi from the central office. But these machines would be put in an arcade and then be forgotten about until some dude comes around to collect the money. Or like maybe do a software update? Is that even a thing? Or were these arcade machines just like, nah, it's done. That's it, until it dies. So it's not ever going to get updated. So if they find the kid, then it's just going to be like, oh, well, it's still locked in there. It doesn't make sense. The above pictures of Taj Allen Merriman and Stephen Philip Curtis are the most well known, but they aren't the only missing children to be featured in Sendai's arcade games. This next image featured two girls who had gone missing, Melinda Marie Smith and April Rose Yates, and it also identifies the organization that was running the search. Okay, so again, for our audio listeners, we have something very similar to before. Missing at the top, a 1-800 number, two pictures of children with their information below, and then in the center, Hide and Seek Foundation vocal, that says vocal, just like a logo of a company or a search organization in the middle of the screen. Okay, these two screenshots both appeared in different versions of Minigolf, with another Sente game, Stompin', featuring pictures of Daniel Godfrey Owens and Charles Brandon Morris, both of whom disappeared in 1985. So what exactly was happening here? Fortunately, we do have some idea what was going on. In an interview, one of the creators and developers of Sente Minigolf was asked about the missing children images. Wait, isn't it just someone at the computer game studio or whatever who's putting these together is like, I've got a good idea. There's those missing kids, right? And they're on the side of cartoons. You know where kids are on the side of milk cartons. You know where kids actually look? Arcade games. So let's put pictures of missing kids in arcade games. It's kind of clever, isn't it? What's the big mystery? In an interview, one of the creators and developers of Sente Minigolf was asked about the missing children images. He explains that he was asked to add them to the game as a new way to test spreading the word about missing children. Okay, so far so sensible. Other interviews state that the FBI had specifically reached out with a request, which is certainly plausible since the images were sourced directly from the FBI. However, why they would have reached out to such a small developer instead of a larger one remains unclear. Probably because they got more sway. And they can test it. If they just reached out to like Atari or whatever and put it on like every Pac-Man machine. Kevin, I know you're probably listening to this, but I'm like,
Atari doesn't make Pac-Man. What are you talking about?
I don't know. I'm just guessing. I don't know. But there'd be like, that's a very large rollout very quickly. By targeting a smaller developer, they can test the impact of it before asking a bigger developer to do this. And the bigger developers also more likely to say no. Perhaps it was because the biggest game developers were all in Japan at the time, so they were just contacting whoever they could in the United States. Fair play. Of course, there was no commercial internet to speak of. There was no way to connect the arcade cabinets to a server where information could be updated, which meant that these images had to be hard-coded into the game. Arcade cabinets feature a number of dip switches that control various features of the game, such as the price per play and difficulty level. These were historically only accessible to people who owned physical cabinets, but emulation has changed all of that. The premier arcade emulator is known as MAME, or Multi-Arcade Machine Emulator. One of the many features of MAME is that you can set and adjust the dip switches. Minigolf was essentially completed by the time the request came in, so the developers just added 3 dip switches to control the missing children message. The first switch labeled Display Kids. That caused the images to appear on the screen while it was running in attract mode. The other switches are Kid on Left Located and Kid on Right Located, which would put the word located in red text over the corresponding image. Okay, that makes sense. It feels like a lot of, like, a very permanent thing. Because, I mean, I guess there are kids who just go missing and are never found, which is, like, a dark thought that I just want to quickly move on from. But this is a very permanent thing. It was honestly a clever idea in theory, and it's not like arcade cabinet attract modes didn't feature other messages as well. For example, anyone who grew up in the 1980s almost certainly had seen an arcade cabinet flash the FBI logo and the message, "Winners don't use drugs." There we go, spreading the good word. Notable people who didn't see their message include Lance Armstrong. I was just about to say, like, dude, have you not heard of Sports Doping? Maria Sharapova and Doc Ellis, who threw a no-hitter while tripping balls on acid. But while it may have been clever in theory, in practice it appears to have been an unsuccessful campaign. Among other reasons it was unlikely to work is that it was just way too creepy. The images were so sudden and jarring, and they were made all the more eerie by the game's normal and upbeat sound effects playing in the background behind the images. Why can't you just turn that off when the images are on the screen? That's weird. Although these images have been the subject of discussion on the internet for decades, there is still one question that remains. What actually happened to these children? Well, they were all happily found. Oh, I lied. I just said that because that's what I want to hear, but I know it's not going to be the case.
I hate you so much.
Sources typically state that of the 6 missing children shown, only Taj Merriman was ever located. In a forum discussion about these missing posters, a user managed to find an old newspaper article stating that Taj was the victim of a family kidnapping, having been taken by his mother. It's unclear when he was found, but she was convicted 3 years after his initial disappearance. Previous investigations have also found a Stephen P. Curtis who was the right age, down to the month, and living in the same general area as the boy who had gone missing. Though it's likely this is the same person, it's not a particularly unique name. Similarly, and appropriately aged Daniel Owens and Charles Morris have both been identified as well. I can't say with absolute certainty that those three men are the same boys that went missing in the 70s and 80s, but there's a decent chance they are alive and well. And if you know them, and you're listening to this shows like quite a few people watch this these days. If you know one of them, or like know someone who knows one, be like,
Yo, dude.
What's his name?
Charlie. Sea Dog. Is this you as a kid, Charlie?
While there are pictures available, it's hard to compare a picture of a man in his 40s with a low-quality picture of a 5-year-old kid and say that it's the same person. Fortunately, I managed to find something that other investigations were unable to regarding one of the missing girls. Thanks to a 1997 yearbook, I can say with absolute certainty that April Rose Yates was recovered. Not only Kevin doing some detective work. Not only did the high school photo share some rather astonishing similarities to the picture of her as a young girl, but there was a childhood photo of her in the yearbook as well. It wasn't the same photo used for the missing poster, but it is unmistakably the same person. That just leaves Melinda Marie Smith. Though Smith is a painfully common last name, that spelling of Melinda is a bit unusual. Melinda. Oh, with an A. Malinda, rather than Melinda. With an E. Okay, and that should narrow down the search quite a bit. Unfortunately, that search turns up absolutely nothing. Neither I, nor anyone else, seem to have been able to find any information on if she were ever recovered, or if she might be alive somewhere today. I also mentioned earlier that Scent was a small... The problem is also Melinda Marie Smith is a woman, and... and that's a problem. No, I mean, if she got married, her last name probably will change, which will make, her more difficult to find. I also mentioned earlier that Scent was a small developer who folded after just a few years despite being fully owned by Bally. As a result, there aren't ROMs available of all of their games. Some of the games they produced have faded completely into obscurity, lost to time. This means that there may have been other missing children featured in some of Sente's games whose images haven't been rediscovered. As such, there's no way to know how many people went to the arcade back in the 90s only to come face to face with the image of a lost child who was never found. Corpse01.mdl. Hey Simon, want to see a dead body? Not particularly, but I can see I can see the picture because it's on my screen already. You see, and it's like a not pixelated. What's it called? Where you can see the jagged edges in a video game. Like is that aliasing? It's like aliased. It's a digital body. Don't worry, it's just going to be a screenshot from a video game, allegedly. Half-Life 2 was the much-anticipated sequel to Valve's critical and commercial success Half-Life. God, Half-Life 2 was a banger of a game. And Half-Life 3 is the very much-anticipated sequel to Half-Life 2, and a thing that is definitely going to happen someday, I promise.
It's been 84 years.
However, Half-Life 2 went through some serious changes during its development. The original game was much darker, but a lot of the grittier elements were toned down after a beta version of the game was leaked. But not all of the darker elements were removed. There's a minor character in Half-Life 2 known only by his asset file name, Corpse01.mdl. The original beta version of Corpse01 had a larger role than in the released game, but he was still a minor character. However, the character model was extremely popular and has been prominently featured in many other games built on Valve's source engine, such as Garry's Mod. For anyone unfamiliar, this is Corpse01. Wait, Kevin left me a note that I was just reading. And he says, don't feel obligated to look at it if you don't want. It's a screenshot from Half-Life 2. How can I not look at it? It's on the screen. It's there. I've already seen it. It's a screenshot from Half-Life 2 included for the editor's benefit, but it's even creepier than it first appears. Oh no, what am I missing in here? His face is it's really quite graphically grim, and he's watching some dude on the TV for some reason. the corpses. Okay, let's find out. This character model appears many times throughout Half-Life 2 on corpses whose lives are ended in a variety of different ways, but there's always been something about this texture that people find particularly eerie. Though not as dark as the original beta, Half-Life 2 is still a pretty dark game. Even so, something about this character model just seemed off, almost as if it was too lifelike. Perhaps that's why Corpse 01 has become such a popular asset in other Source Engine games, because it was so different than all the other models. Oh god, was it actually modeled on like someone's like burned corpse? That's really grim, Valve. What the f*** if that's true? And for 20 years, that's all Corpse 01 was. Half-Life 2 had cutting-edge graphics at the time, and this was just an overly realistic video game asset thought to be a leftover relic from the game's much more intense original beta version. But in late 2022, that all changed thanks to a post on the subreddit r/iBleach. Before it got banned from Reddit, iBleach was a community for sharing some of the most brutal gore on the internet. God damn. Just reading someone's description of videos that were posted there is enough to make me extremely uncomfortable. A user posted some pictures to iBleach that they found particularly gruesome. The user claimed that these images had come from a forensic pathology textbook, though to the best of my knowledge, that textbook has never been found. It's possible the book was identified on the original thread, but unfortunately, the way that the Wayback Machine works doesn't allow you to view subreddits that are marked as 18+, so I can't go scour the iBleach archives. Honestly, Kevin, probably for the best. However, the original image is very easy to find for any of you that truly want to.
Don't.
Wait, have Valve taken this image from like a pathology textbook of a horribly burned corpse and used it to model one of their dead bodies in their game? That is truly grim. Of course, there's very little need to see the original image, as it's almost identical to the face of Corpse 01. The only change they made was duplicating the empty eye socket, as the original photo still had one of its eyes fully intact. Perhaps the developers of Valve decided that leaving one real eye in the image would have made it too unsettling for their audience, or maybe it would have just become too obvious that there was a real dead body in their game. That's so grim and really scary, and the face on that thing it's not nice. However, this all begs the question of who the person was and what happened to them. The person is clearly a burn victim, with their entire face having been burned off. The weird thing is the rest of the body is completely unscathed. The neck, shoulders, and chest are unharmed, with the only black spots being charred bits that fell off the person's face. There are potential ways that something like this could happen, I suppose, but the strangest detail is the man's long hair was completely unaffected by the fire as well. What happened to your face? It's as if someone intentionally burned that person's face off, and this has become the main speculation. The most common story that appears online is the person was the victim of a mafia hit, and that the face was burned off with a blowtorch. I'm certainly not going to suggest that the mafia wouldn't do something like this, but since the man's identity is unknown, this is pretty much just baseless speculation that has been repeated so many times that it's turning into fact. Yeah, it's like,
what happened to his face was burned off by the mafia?
Based on what? Based on what?
Then again, there's not really a better explanation for what happened. I've seen the idea floated around that the body could have been donated to science and the face was then burned off to demonstrate severe burn damage for the purpose of a textbook. However, as far as I can tell, something like that would be extremely unethical and would never actually happen. Wait, it wouldn't? Why is that unethical? If someone's donating their body to science, don't you go thinking that it's just going to be used for, like, curing cancer. Like, donating your body to science, all sorts of crazy shit can happen. Like, there's body farms. Well, they'll just, like, leave you in a field, like your body in a field, just to see how decomposition would happen. Or, like, they'll be like, oh, well, we just wanted to see what happens when we place a body on an ant's nest.
Oh, that's terrifying.
We just wanted to see, just in case we find a body on an ant's nest someday. We need to date how long it's been there. I mean, this seems fine. Like, if you're donating your body to science, yeah, maybe your burned face will end up in a textbook to demonstrate severe burns. It's science. I don't have a... Is that weird that I don't have a problem with that?
Yep.
Like, you've donated your body to science. You donated it to science. It's done. It's a shell. I like my shell. But once I'm dead, it's just a shell. Maybe in the 1930s or something it could have, but the photo is too high quality to be anything that old. Whatever happened to this man, it almost certainly happened before he wound up in the hands of forensic pathologists. But what was that? What there was, and who he is, may be forever a mystery. Even if the original textbook is uncovered, medical confidentiality standards means that no names will be included to identify the cadavers contained within the textbook. Good. I think this is much better that we don't know who this random burn victim is. I think that's way more respectful. Let's just leave it at that and not dig into it too much, okay? Station.exe. This mystery isn't nearly as morbid. Good. It's just downright weird. The game was first posted to 4chan's paranormal board /x/ in 2013 as a single file, station.exe. If you're downloading an exe file from 4chan, what are you doing? What are you doing? According to the user that uploaded the file, they had purchased a CD containing this disc at a tech expo. Some reports say that he purchased the disc intentionally, while others say it was hidden in a jewel case beneath the disc he was intentionally purchasing. Oh, a jewel case. Like those old CD cases. Are they called jewel cases? I didn't know that. I can't confirm for certain which is the official story, but it doesn't really matter since it's undoubtedly bullshit anyway. Rather surprisingly, however, people downloaded Station.exe and started playing it. This is honestly shocking since it was a year after the release of LostBoy.exe on 4chan. Lost Boy was an unsolvable maze full of images that were designed to be creepy just for the hell of it. By itself, the game was nothing special, but it became famous as the game that hacked 4chan, sort of anyway. The game itself was harmless, but it was being distributed using a Mediafire link. Oh my god, there's something I haven't heard of Mediafire in about 20 years. Piggybacking off the popularity of the game, another user started distributing a different Mediafire link that claimed to be lostboy.exe. Again, what are you doing downloading exe files from people who are linking on 4chan? You're just gonna get a virus. Even I know this. Oh no. The file was actually a rat. That's a Trojan horse or whatever it is. What's it stand for? I'm sure Kevin will tell me. Remote Access Trojan, there you go, that was downloaded by a surprising number of 4chan users. Some were f***ed with by receiving emails with images from their own webcams. It's so creepy. While others had their bank accounts emptied. Oh, Jesus. What would I rather? Would I rather have like someone access to my webcam? I'll just throw that computer away so fast. But my bank account being empty, I'll be like, bruh. Can that happen? Oh, God. I feel like now when I want to log into my bank, they're like, okay, enter your birth number here. Like, I think that's the European, I think you Americans call it a social security number. We'd call it a national insurance number in the UK. I'll enter your birth number. And it's like you enter the birth number. And then it's like you confirm it on your phone. And then it shows you a QR code. Then you scan the QR code. And then you click confirm in the app. And it finally lets you log into your internet bank. You're like, okay. I feel like I'm logging into like MI6's server at points. For many, it was a painful reminder of why you should never run random executable files you find online, especially on 4chan. And yet, despite this only taking place a year later, people began downloading and running Station.exe. Fortunately, it wasn't a virus this time around, but I can't stress enough how bad of an idea this is in general. With the public service announcement out of the way, what exactly was this game? Station.exe was a game made using Blender, and it's about as simple a game as it could possibly be. The game is set at an abandoned station with a bunch of generators. The building has 2 floors, though the second story is completely empty, and there's a dock leading off to the water. That's the entirety of the setting. Everything is barely textured, and there's nothing to do except wander around the desolate location. How weird. This sounds like someone's earliest attempts of Blender. After a couple of minutes, some weird ambient sounds would start to play in the background. The audio was slowed down for the game, but the sounds have been identified as recordings of the mysterious sky trumpets heard around the world. What are sky trumpets? Mysterious to some people anyway, there's a really simple explanation for all of them. What are they? Following the sounds commencing, the player would start to be chased by 3 disembodied circular heads that oddly resembled Thomas the Tank Engine's face, but creepier. It sounds like I've wandered into someone's bad dream. You can run as much as you like, but the environment is really small, so within a minute or so, the heads are guaranteed to catch you. And once that happens, the game crashes. The end. It's a really and seemingly incomplete game, and by itself, there wouldn't be anything particularly interesting about it. But it's also really small, both the game environment itself and the decompiled code of the game. So if there was anything secret hidden inside it, it wouldn't take long for people to find it. And they did. Inside the game, hidden on the bottom of one of the walls, are the numbers 62.61605711,113.947335. Immediately, I'm like, this is a longitude and latitude. These are clearly coordinates, yes, so people put them into Google Earth to see what was there. As it turns out, these coordinates are the location of an abandoned diamond mine deep in Siberia. This is just someone trolling, right? Station.exe is a one-to-one recreation of the mine, at least as far as we can tell from Google Earth. Well, how tiny is this mine? The station and dock were both there, but there was also another structure not present in the game, a silo labeled CC-18 Satan. My best guess is that the silo was, or probably is, home to the Russian R-36M intercontinental ballistic missile. NATO's reporting name for those missiles was SS-18 Satan, and if I know that, then obviously the Russians know that. They may have chosen to mark the silo with NATO's nickname for their missile to taunt them, but the letter S in Cyrillic looks like the Latin letter C. Hence it looks like CC-18 to Westerners rather than SS-18. That's just my personal speculation, but it's the most logical thing that I could come up with for why there would be a missile silo labeled Satan in the Siberian wilderness. Anyway, obviously the first step to follow that lead was for someone to go and check out the station in person in Siberia, okay? But this was a non-starter for a couple of reasons. First, it turns out that there aren't a lot of Anons living in the middle of nowhere in Siberia. Someone in Russia, who was close enough to make the journey, was eventually found, but they were stopped by military guards before they could get anywhere near the station. Turns out, it's located in one of Russia's restricted zones, so nobody can actually go there. So how did the person know what it looks like inside? Wait. They don't need to know what it looks like inside, because we just said that the people determined that the game was true to life of the diamond mine just based on Google Earth. So they could see the dock, they could see the 2-story building from satellite images. So they don't necessarily need to have been there to have made the game. However, there were other discoveries made in the game's code. These were numerous references to and quotes from /K, 4chan's weapons board. A couple of other images were found in the game as well that contained 2 more sets of coordinates. One was for a scientific research center for genetic experimentation and disease control, also in Siberia, and the other was for a biological weapons testing facility in Uzbekistan. But perhaps the most interesting part of decompiling the game was the code itself. To people familiar with Blender, it was clear the program was not originally created using the game engine. Instead, it was coded in some other language, then modified by hand so that it would compile and run in Blender. Wait, so maybe this was a floor plan, when an architect creates a what's it called? Is it a visualization? Is that like a 3D visualization maybe? When you're doing a kitchen or whatever, and they're like, and here's what your kitchen will look like. So maybe they took that and they put it into Blender so people could see it. This was weird to say the least, and it fueled speculation that this was originally some old Soviet-era program that was converted to a Blender game. Personally, I don't buy that bit of the story for a second, but it's still a weird detail I have no explanation for. Hidden inside the code was also a link to a now-defunct website called semperprotinum.com. The name translates to I will always resist, and it contained images and documents about military bases and weapons. However, while the different folder names and their sizes were all visible, everything was password protected. People were able to briefly get in using the username instrument and the password Glockenspiel, so some of the images were seen, but the password was quickly changed after being discovered, and the new password was never broken. Wow, people cracked that? Kind of like Glockenspiel? I guess it's quite simple because it's 2 words, I assume. Glocken and Spiel sounds German. So like a brute force dictionary attack could have got that maybe? The site's owner denied that any of the images that Anons had found there existed, making it both highly suspicious and a dead end once everyone was locked out. For as much as has been uncovered about Station.exe, nothing meaningful is really known. Why was this game created and uploaded to 4chan, and why does it point to specific locations? Is this actually connected to the Russian military in some way, or was everything deliberately set up to create as much mystery and intrigue as possible? I absolutely think that. I think someone's just trolling. It's 4chan, my dudes. Many people view it as some sort of failed alternate reality game or ARG, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. The whole point of an ARG is to tell some sort of story and for players to make their way to the end. But they were immediately locked out of the website associated with the game once it was uncovered, and the physical location is inaccessible to anyone without specific Russian military clearance. I know I already touched upon lostboy.exe, which was a deliberately unbeatable maze made for the lulz, so perhaps this was meant to be an unbeatable ARG. That just doesn't feel right to me though, and I believe there's almost certainly something else here. What that something else is, however, nobody knows. Sad Satan. Finally, we're going to end today with one of the darkest and most infamous mysteries in all of gaming. The story of Sad Satan. As a preface of this, do not seek out this game. Okay?
I do what I want.
Do not download this game. There are multiple different versions running around, but just assume that none of them are safe. Thinking that you'll be fine playing Sad Satan is like telling yourself you'll be fine only smoking crack recreationally. It's a terrible idea, and please don't do it. No, I only smoke crack recreationally, not a professional crack smoker, God forbid.
Is it crack? Is that what you smoke? Do you smoke crack?
The reasons why will become apparent shortly, but please do not tempt fate. I realize that probably sounds like the start of a god-awful creepypasta, but it's a genuine warning. With that out of the way, let's travel back to June the 25th, 2015. That was the day that the YouTube channel Obscure Horror Corner, or OHC, introduced the world to Sad Satan. OHC was, ironically, an obscure horror channel. The entire channel was dedicated to let's plays of obscure horror games, except he was completely silent throughout the videos. It was just gameplay footage. There's going to be a winner. Not really, unless you're like absolute god tier at games. This is not a way to gain a following, as it's the personality of the host that makes let's play videos entertaining. Yes, unless you're an absolute god at playing games. Unsurprisingly, his videos didn't get many views. Even now, after his original Sad Satan video has received over 4 million views, most of OHC's videos have only a couple of thousand. So what made this game different? OHC posted a link to his video on Reddit, claiming that Sad Satan was a game that had been given to him on the dark web, the typical setting of all spooky internet stories. Yeah. It's like, guys, I ordered a mystery box from the dark web. So, come on now. The game was given to him by a user who identified himself only as ZK. Over the next week, OHC uploaded 4 more videos of gameplay footage. In the middle of all of those uploads, the website Kotaku published a story about Sad Satan, along with a brief interview with OHC. The gameplay itself was bad. Obviously, the point of the game was just to be scary, but nothing about it actually seems fun. You wander aimlessly through a bunch of corridors where somehow everything is disturbingly backlit. That's the entire game. As far as I can tell, there's no ending. You just walk around while creepy images occasionally flashed on the screen and disturbing audio played, much of which plays backwards. Or at least the images were supposed to be creepy, but perhaps it was just the surprise factor. The first one of these images to appear in OHC's playthrough was just a screen grab from Will Smith's The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That might be terrifying for Chris Rock.
Okay.
But back in 2015, all it would likely do is make people laugh. However, while not showing anything too outrageous, the images do start to take a darker tone. For example, there's a picture of JFK smiling from his Dallas motorcade moments before being killed. Other pictures feature Rolf Harris, an Australian musician and actor who was convicted of assaulting 4 underage girls, and Satomu Miyazaki, one of Japan's most infamous serial killers who exclusively targeted girls 4 through 7. There was even a picture of Jimmy Savile smiling alongside Margaret Thatcher while they both held up badges promoting the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. You've got to be shitting me. Really? Oh yes, and there was a picture of Satan with... because why not? Sounds like something you'd get from Midjourney, doesn't it? The audio included a good amount of creepy ambience and some screaming, but like I said before, there was also a lot of backwards audio included as well. Naturally, the creator of the game had to include Led Zeppelin's hit Stairway to Heaven, as it was the source of the game's name. In 1982, some batshit insane evangelist went on a tirade about demonic music, claiming that if you play Stairway to Heaven backwards, it says the lyrics, "Here's to my sweet Satan, the one whose little path would make me sad, whose power is Satan, he will give those with him 666. There was a little tool shed where he made us suffer, sad Satan." Such bullshit. While technically the portion of the song does sound a bit like that when played backwards, it's obviously a coincidence. Yet, if you played it to someone, people would be like, I have no idea. Nothing. And then if you tell them these lyrics or whatever, and then they listen to the end, they'll be like, oh yeah, I hear it. Because you're primed to hear it. There are millions of examples of stuff like this because backwards audio is weird, and I bet if you play enough clips of Simon backwards, you'll eventually find one that sounds like he's saying,
"Send me all your bitcoins."
Whatever, Led Zeppelin doesn't need me to defend their work, but even though it's clearly a coincidence, it does still sound creepy. Another bit of backwards audio that's more relevant to the images I mentioned comes from The Doors. In their album cover of Alabama's song Whiskey Bar, Jim Morrison changed one of the original lyrics. The slightly altered lyric, which was played backwards in Sad Satan, is "Show me the way to the next little girl." There's also a bunch of audio clips of Charles Manson thrown in there as well, and those aren't backwards masked. You get to clearly hear Manson say, "If I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left," on a loop, which is fun. In the descriptions for OHC's gameplay videos and his original Reddit post, it included a darkweb.onion link to the game, but that link didn't work. It's not a huge surprise since he claimed to have received the game months earlier, and .onion links have a bad habit of disappearing after a short period of time. However, the day after the final Let's Play video was uploaded, someone finally noticed the link OHC provided never could have worked because it contained the number 9. Onion links are created in base 32, which contains the letters A through Z and the numbers 2 through 7. A link containing 1, 8, or 9 could never have been real in the first place. This created a lot of questions surrounding the authenticity of the game. Was this actually some obscure horror game OHC had discovered, or was it something he made himself as a publicity stunt? Yeah, I definitely think it's the boring, publicity stunt thing. On July the 7th, nearly 2 weeks after this all began, the Kotaku interview with OHC was updated. He had responded to the writer's request for an updated statement in which he claimed that he deliberately gave everyone a broken link because the game was full of gore and illegal pornography and he had to edit it out of his videos and he didn't want others to download the game. But 18 minutes before this was posted on Kotaku, there was a new development on 4chan. Someone claiming to be the dark web user ZK was pissed off at OHC for lying to everyone. ZK claimed that OHC wasn't showing them the real Sad Satan, so he provided a clear web link to a download of what he claimed was the true Sad Satan. People have been eager to download the game ever since OHC had showed it off on his channel, so they jumped all over this link. I know I already told you in the last entry, but for the love of God, stop running random executable files you find online, especially from 4chan. Yes, it's not hard. This is how your grandma gets viruses. You should, people who are not over 80 should not be falling for this. Maybe everyone thought it had been a bluff, but the true Sad Satan contained everything that OHC claimed was in it. It was full of images of gore and illegal pornography, including brutal gore right on the title screen. To make matters even worse, as if that was necessary, most of the images of gore also featured children. What the f***? However, despite ZK claiming that this was the true Sad Satan, it was clear to players that it wasn't the original game featured on OHC. Despite still being referred to as the true or real version of Sad Satan, it was just a clone somebody threw together based off the original gameplay videos, making sure to add all sorts of illegal images and, of course, viruses. These weren't your typical run-of-the-mill viruses either, like Lost Boy EXE's Rat. If a person really knows what they're doing, viruses can cause irreparable damage. Writing an assembly, while much more difficult, gives a person low-level control over a system's hardware. You can just tell the machine to send voltage somewhere in quantities that the system should absolutely not allow. Someone with enough knowledge can easily destroy a person's CPU, and whoever wrote viruses included in the clone Sad Satan definitely had enough knowledge. The viruses were sophisticated enough that even when installed and run on virtual machines, they could break out into the actual computer and completely brick it. No fucking way. That's like, I didn't even know that was possible. Like, I always been, if I was going to download an EXE from 4chan, I'd be like, definitely run that shit in a virtual machine. I'd run that shit on a virtual machine within a virtual machine on a PC that I don't want, that is not connected to the internet afterwards. But I didn't realize they could jump out of a virtual machine. Eventually, a couple of users banded together to remove the malware and illegal images to release a clean version of the game, but don't go looking for that either. At this point, there are at least 7 different versions of the game around, only one of which is clean. It's not worth the risk, especially because, and I cannot stress this enough, the actual game itself is boring as f***. Just watch someone else's playthrough on YouTube if you care that much. This all leaves us with a few mysteries, all of which remain officially unsolved to this day. Who created the original Sad Satan? Is it possible to play anywhere? And who created the cloned version? The easiest of these to address is whether or not the original Sad Satan, as featured on OHC, is available to play anywhere. The answer to that is no, and it never has been. OHC was playing it on his channel, so at least one copy of the game exists somewhere, but nobody else has ever uncovered a copy of the original game, and that ties into the first question of who made the original version, because it is believed that OHC made it himself as a publicity stunt. I tell you, it's always the boring option. There's pretty strong evidence for this as well. The story of the game's origin is obvious bullshit, and it's a game that nobody else in the world has ever found. That's not definitive of anything, because even if the dark story web was a lie, it could still have been an exceedingly rare game that nobody else online was aware of. More compelling is that roughly 5 months before the Sad Satan videos released on his channel, OHC was on Reddit asking how to make his own horror game. Trail, there you go, paper trail. You could certainly argue that it's just a coincidence, but it seems unlikely. Technically, this is considered unsolved, as nobody has proven the connection, and he hasn't admitted to it. But it is largely agreed that OHC made the original Sad Satan. But that's where things get really weird. He sent a revised statement to Kotaku claiming that he deliberately posted a fake link because the game contained illegal content, but it clearly didn't. Aside from there being no obvious splices in his footage, why would OHC fill a game with illegal content, knowing that nobody in the world but him would ever play that game, and that he couldn't include that content in his YouTube videos? I know that stupid people do stupid things all the time, but this seems to defy reason. Yeah, people don't like wasting their time pointlessly, though. Like, even stupid people are like, well, why am I doing this? So if Sad Satan and its fake backstory were designed as a publicity stunt, is it possible OHC sent his statement to Kotaku to further capitalize off the added hype from the cloned version posted to 4chan by ZK? There was an 18-minute gap between ZK's post on 4chan and the Kotaku update, although we don't know the exact time that OHC contacted Kotaku with his updated information and whether or not it was before or after the cloned version was published to 4chan. But even if he was trying to ride the wave of free publicity, what exactly was his goal? His YouTube channel was abandoned after all of this, never posting another video, and the original version of Sad Satan was never released. If he wanted to ramp up excitement so that he could sell his game, that would have been one thing, but since that didn't happen, I struggle to find out exactly what OHC's play was. But none of that addresses who created the cloned version with all the illegal shit in it. Under different circumstances, I'd say that why they did this was yet another mystery, but not when dealing with 4chan. I mean, yeah, this is they just did it for the shits and the giggles. This is exactly the sort of thing I'd expect to happen on 4chan, so why someone did it isn't a question at all. Currently, there are two main suspects who created the cloned version. The first is Gary Graves, aka Scarebear. Gary has a tiny little YouTube channel called Scarebear that mostly featured music, but fortunately there was one horrible comedy video in which he was featured as well. This is a good thing because it gives confirmation about what he looked like, which can be matched to the known mugshot of Gary. Wait, mugshot? He got arrested? The first bit of evidence connecting Gary to Sad Satan was a video on the channel titled Sad Satan, which has since been deleted. This video was released roughly 3 years before the entire saga involving OHC, and the title was likely just a coincidence. After all, it is a reference to Stairway of Heaven. There was also a Reddit user by the name of ScarebearZK who made a few posts related to Sad Satan. The account was registered before the clone Sad Satan game was released, but after the Kotaku interview was published, citing ZK as the dark web entity from whom the game originated, this means that there's a high probability that it was just someone, probably Gary, trolling and pretending to be the creator of the game. Yeah, I think so. Seems very reasonable. That's all pretty flimsy evidence. Yes, it's just circumstantial. It's the best we have. Do I think it's likely? Yeah, I mean, why not? It's not crazy. The Gary created the clone version, so what has people so convinced? That would be the mugshot that I mentioned earlier. On February the 5th, 2017, Gary was sitting in a cell in Lubbock County Jail on a burglary charge. His girlfriend was back home using his phone, and she discovered multiple images of illegal pornography on it. She immediately called the police, though Gary was fortunately already in the right place. He was convicted in late 2017 and sentenced to 108 months in prison. Good. While it makes sense that the creator of the clone Sad Satan could be a person who would wind up in prison for such a crime, it's still a pretty weak connection. Yeah, again, it's like, is it possible? Yes. Maybe there's a lot of coincidences here. I'd be like, yeah, it's not bad. Is it enough to convict someone if they were convicting someone for this? No, it's definitely not beyond reasonable doubt. Is it even more likely than not? Yeah, I mean, maybe. Many people claim with absolute certainty that Gary was the one responsible for the illegal version of the game, but I'm not particularly convinced. I'm not saying that he definitely didn't do it, just that the existing evidence leaves a lot to be desired. And that brings us to the other main suspect, which is OHC himself. People called bullshit on his dark web story, right? And rightfully so. It's clearly a fake story designed to create an extra sense of spooky mystery around the game, and a number of people fell for it, including someone at Kotaku. However, a lot of people didn't. 4chan was full of people mocking OHC and what they saw as a dumb little creepypasta designed to promote his dumb little game. Because of that, some people argue that OHC created the clone Sad Satan himself as a way to silence the haters. If he wanted them to believe it was really a dark web game, then he had to release a version filled with dark web content. Oh yes, and he also had to get back at the Kotaku writer who was now calling bullshit so he could publicly claim that this stuff was in the game all along. Yeah, but it was released afterwards, dude. It's pretty transparent. If all that's the case, OHC should be sitting in a cell right alongside Gary. And yet, nobody knows where he is. After running a YouTube channel that garnered little to no attention, OHC pulled off a publicity stunt that raked in millions of views for his Sad Satan videos, and then he just vanished. The videos aren't even monetized, so it's not like he can collect passive income from all of this nonsense. Yeah, that's not going to be monetized, though. Those videos not going to be monetized. Though it's all but a certainty that OHC was behind the original version of Sad Satan that he featured in his videos, the mystery behind who created the clone version may never be solved. Though a case can be made for either Gary or OHC being the person responsible, but neither case is terribly convincing. The true creator is likely a completely unidentified person. All I know for sure is that I hope that this remains the darkest internet mystery for a long time so that we can talk about more wholesome things, like why Tiger Woods' 99 PGA Tour Golf has an episode of South Park hidden on the disc. Now I'm extremely curious about that, Kevin. Don't leave me on that. And that's where I'll leave you on that, dear audience. Thanks for being here. I hope you liked the episode. Obviously something a little bit different today. Tell me if you liked it in the comments. And I'll see you next time.